Welcome. You're now listening to episode 116 from the Shed End. As always, myself, Theo. And as you can see, the other Theo has returned. He's back this week. Theo, how you doing?
Not bad, thanks. A bit tired. Had a driving lesson at 6 a.m. this morning. I'm not going to be making that mistake again of doing it before a work day. So it meant waking up at 4:30 a.m. to get to Clapham Junction.
You don't do
Roads
things
were
easy.
empty. No, roads were empty. But yeah, the test is fast approaching, so feeling a bit knackered now. But hopefully I'll be a bit more re-energized because I'm filling in for my mates' five-a-side football team tonight in East London. So yeah, I'm going to need a couple of coffees or Red Bull to power me throughout the day. But yeah, otherwise I'm not bad. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Not bad, actually. Yeah, I'm good. It's been a good, productive week. Kids have been off. Half term's finished, so it's back to normal. And yeah, I'm just good, man. Just like you've got football later, I've got my eight-a-side match, so I'm looking forward to that. Putting another defensive masterclass like Tasazi, hopefully. But yeah, just before we move on, I mean the driving lessons as well. I mean, there's probably a good thing to do driving lessons early in the morning, late at night, and in the day because you get a mixture of different times, isn't it? So it's probably as much as the 4:30 is probably killing you right now. It's probably a good thing you did that because it is always good to just try and drive in different times of the day to understand what the difference of the roads are like, if that makes sense. But before we get into this episode, please go and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you go to the Linktree link in the description and subscribe to those social accounts that you'll see. If you click that link, make sure you like this video as well. And if you're listening on the audio, again, we appreciate everything that you're doing on there. So again, if you're not, follow on the audio version of the podcast. But reason for you being missing last week, Theo, you got a good opportunity to go and see a Chelsea documentary, which is in the pipeline to be released hopefully very soon. Just give the viewers, the listeners, a bit more about that. What's it all about, and how did you get involved in it as well?
Yeah, so I think it must have been September last year. So about 5, 6 months ago, I was just on my way to work at the bus stop. I kind of live just like around Stamford Bridge in that area. So they must have been putting these little leaflets around bus stops in the area. And I saw an ad that said something along the lines of, "We're looking for passionate Chelsea fans to feature in an upcoming documentary or project about the club. Um, if you're one of the Chelsea fan, please get in touch by contacting this email address." I didn't really think much about it at the time, but I just took a picture of it because my bus was arriving, getting to the office, and my work day was quite quiet. So drafted a quick email to them explaining who I was, why I support Chelsea, why I consider myself a Chelsea super fan or very passionate about the club. I don't think I heard back from them for a couple of days, and then they reached out saying they really like the look of my profile, and they'd love to schedule a Zoom call to kind of learn more about me and interview me with a couple more questions. We scheduled that, and then answered a few of their questions on the call. And then I think it was about November time. They wanted to interview me in person with cameras. I think we initially agreed on location being a pub near Stamford Bridge, but things changed on the day, and we ended up doing it in my home, which I was not expecting. Having a whole film crew just show up to my house with professional lighting, cameras, mics, everything. Had to move all the furniture around as well to give me the space and have the correct lighting, which was a bit of a surreal experience actually. When I just looked around and saw these a whole film crew in my living room and kitchen. But yeah, we got to kind of ask. They asked me a couple of questions. I think the main kind of gist of the project or documentary is interviewing Chelsea fans and understanding their story. So you don't really want to know so much about the history of the club, the players, but it's more the Chelsea fans themselves, their match day routines, their rituals, why they kind of consider themselves the Chelsea super fans, their kind of favorite bit of Chelsea memorabilia, some core Chelsea memories of theirs. And then, yes, we filmed that. And then last week they invited me to a pub. I think people will know about it, the Wolf Pack, which I think is just near Fulham Broadway, to show me the sizzle reel, which is almost like a bit of a trailer to what to expect from the full project. So it was about a 4 or 5 minute trailer, and I do feature quite a bit in it. And from that trailer, they're going to pitch it to kind of some of the large film production companies. And they mentioned some big directors. I can't give too much away. But some big directors that have done documentaries on sports documentaries on Amazon Prime Video, on Netflix, and even to the club itself. So yeah, it's really exciting, and it looks very, very professional and well done. And I'm sure that if it kind of gets bought by someone to kind of make it into a proper documentary, whether that be a feature film or a 6-part episode, a documentary. Then I'm sure there'll be some more interviews and more footage of me. But yeah, really exciting documentary. And I'm sure I'll be posting more about it on my socials and the Shed End social as well when I hear more about it.
Yeah, definitely something worth checking out if you haven't already. I think the Twitter is the Bridge Film. So if you just search the _bridge_film, you should be able to find them on there. And yeah, it's definitely something that I think has probably been needed for Chelsea fans as well, because a lot of you see a lot of now where you see the Sunderland one, I think, on Netflix, and Newcastle have had one, Arsenal have had one previously, where it kind of goes behind the scenes with the players, but you don't necessarily get one from a fan's perspective of match day going fans, or fans that don't go to the matches as much, or just Chelsea fans in general. You don't really see it from a fan's lens perspective. So I think it'd be good to hopefully see this go, if not beyond just the internet, into Netflix, Amazon, or somewhere like that. I think it'd be good, and it's something that I think I've seen glimpses of it, and as you know already, sort of was speaking to them as well. It'll be good. I think it'll be good for any Chelsea fan to see this, and it will take away some of that stigma that from the 80s, the 90s, of the Chelsea fans and how they are and what they tried to represent then, and what Chelsea fans are now as well. I think it'll give a good light on the club as well.
Yeah, definitely. And when I got invited to the pub, was it a week ago on Friday? I wasn't the only one who was invited. There was a few other people that are going to feature in the documentary of the project, and kind of all ages, all kind of groups. Like there was a couple, they must have been in their 60s or 70s. There was a young boy who was only about 10 or 11, I think. There was a kind of an older guy who I think Chelsea fans will know him because he goes around Stamford Bridge in one of those disabled scooters. And I think he goes by a certain name that kind of links him to that. So yeah, there was definitely a kind of a very diverse group of kind of ages represented in the documentary. And you know all about it because they interviewed you as well via Zoom. I've got my friend who lives out in Belgium. He's originally Brazilian, and they interviewed him as well. So I think they want a lot of different perspectives. Yeah. People abroad, people living around Stamford Bridge, people living in the UK. But yeah, it's definitely very exciting. And it's, like you said, I think it's something that's needed with the club now to kind of bring the fans closer to the club and kind of understand their stories and understanding where that passion and kind of hunger to support Chelsea comes from.
Yeah, definitely 100%. So keep your ears peeled. We'll drop a link to the social account for the Bridge Film, so you can just follow them. It should be definitely worth checking out, giving them a follow, and then hopefully some more information comes out about that in the next couple of weeks or months or so. But let's move back to the Premier League. Let's move back to the two performances that we've had since we've last recorded. Crystal Palace a week ago today on Monday as we're recording. Let's start with that game first, but it was a game of two halves, really. It was almost the Chelsea that we know, who doesn't really know how to take their chances, or we create chances but we don't really take them. And in the second half, we kind of switched things on, made a couple of good substitutions as well during the game. But what was your thoughts against Crystal Palace on Selhurst last Monday?
Well, yes, remember, we've got a winning streak against Crystal Palace that runs from, I think, March 2018 up to now. And our last defeat against them was in October 2017. So if there's one team that absolutely hate playing Chelsea, no matter their form, it's Crystal Palace. So yeah, I was still kind of nervous, especially given that first half, because like you said, it was a game of two halves. That first half was absolutely dire. They just lacked tempo. It felt like we were just happy to pass the ball in our own half and not really do much with the possession we had. I don't think we registered a single shot on target in that first half, in fact. And then Crystal Palace, it was a brilliant goal, but it was kind of created by our own kind of unforced errors in Madueke, kind of carelessly giving the ball away when he should have been clearing his lines, and then taking nothing away from the finish. It was fantastic by Jefferson Lerma, I think his name is, who curled it in to the top right corner. But yeah, really awful first half. Second half, we seemed to kind of tweak something. We kind of understood what the game plan was. And I think within a minute or two of the second half, we scored through Conor Gallagher. I don't know if that was because of that kind of prolonged halftime break where the ref was trying to sort out his microphone or his kind of communication device, but it felt like Chelsea were ready for that second half, and whereas Crystal Palace was still in the changing rooms. But yeah, take nothing away from Conor Gallagher's performance and finishes for both goals, in fact, because they were great. He kind of lucked into the penalty box when he needed, and two very good finishes. I think there was some crazy statistic that he'd covered 13 kilometers throughout that game. So he literally covered almost every single blade of grass. And I go running quite regularly, and 13 kilometers, that's like from where I live to Houses of Parliament and back in a way.
Yeah.
So yeah, he must have literally been all over that pitch, and he's like an engine. So yeah, he was definitely my man of the match for that game. And then yeah, we kind of left it late with two second goals, the second and the third goal from Gallagher and Enzo. But yeah, I think it's what we've been lacking a lot recently this season is our midfielders contributing to goals. And that's what we saw in that game against Palace. Gallagher getting two and Enzo getting one. We saw it again at Villa Park, which I didn't get a chance to talk about. But our midfielders, again, contributing with goals. And if we can get those, the Caicedos, the Gallaghers, the Enzo Fernandez's, the Lavias and Ugochukwu's when they're back to contribute with goals, and hopefully Cassidy, if he features more, that will put a bit less pressure on the Nkukus, the Jacksons, the Sterlings, the Palmers. But hopefully that's what we need, because we've been so used in the past to our midfield players contributing with goals. When we had Lampard, when we had even Jorginho, even though they were penalties, he was still contributing with goals. And back in the day, Fabregas as well, Essien, these type of players. So yeah, I think really kind of second half was very a lot of kind of positives to take away from it. First half was a first half to forget.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think Maurizio Pochettino going into that game didn't really change too much. I think from that Villa lineup, if I remember correctly, it was almost. I think was it the one change that he made? I think in that I can't remember where it was, whether it was in defence now, but
it's Silva for Badiashile, I think.
Silva for Badiashile, wasn't it? So going into that game, I think me and Eunice spoke about it on the last episode, but we're going into that game, we automatically wanted a win. We were saying there's no way we can lose to this Palace team. I think they had Eze out, Elise I think was out as well.
Guehi
was out. So there was three key players for Palace. I know they still had Mateta and Jefferson Lerma, like you said, Hughes in midfield for them, but we couldn't go into that game and lose it. There was just no way. You said I think 2017 was our last defeat against Palace, but it just seemed like something wasn't working in that first half. And again, like you said, I don't know if it was the delay to the referee or just something that was said at half time, but it just sparked something in the team for me going forward. It was interesting again because obviously in the Villa game and the Palace game, we got to see Nicholas Jackson, the left wing, and Cole Palmer was almost playing as that sort of lone, sort of false nine, if you want to call it that. And it kind of worked. It worked very well. We'll get onto the City game in a minute, but it worked really well against Palace. It feels like that's more of a role now I would see Nicholas Jackson possibly trying to occupy. We've spoken about Mudryk on here quite a bit about he hasn't really pulled up trees. He hasn't really done what we were expecting him to do, but there does seem to be a role for Nicholas Jackson on that left side. Is that something you want to see more of, do you reckon?
Yeah, definitely. I think we'll kind of touch on it in the City game as well, but he seems to have that more kind of role on the wing, and he seems to actually contribute a lot with assists. In the game against Villa, he kind of ghosted into the penalty box and got his header really well. I think, again, when he played in a similar position or just behind a striker in the Luton game in between New Year's and Christmas and did very well in that game as well. So I definitely feel like there's a role to play for him. Like you said, I feel like if I was to pick a player to see more of between us now and the end of the season, it would definitely be a Jackson over a Mudryk, 100%. So I think that's worked for how long, I'm not sure. And also it kind of leaves a bit of a question mark on how Nkuku fits into this team now, whether he's going to start games, whether he's going to feature as a striker, as a kind of holding, as a sit behind the striker or kind of play support to the striker. But right now, I think I want to kind of change that offensive trio of Jackson, Palmer and possibly Sterling after his performance against City.
Yeah, it's one thing I think I've said on here, and I know you've said it as well, is that consistency, understanding what is our best 11. And we have to say we're almost close to getting there now. I think when we talk about the players that we still have out, are they going to walk into this team? Possibly not. Maybe we need to see what Lavia can do. Obviously, Reece James has got to come back at some point. But apart from that, you see some of these players now. You would expect your core 11, your spine of the team, albeit with the exclusion of what we would say is our natural goal scorer that we don't really have, is our team now. So I think we have to stick with what we have. For me personally, Nicholas Jackson's played really well on that left. Cole Palmer's fitted in and slotted in around the attacking role, sometimes on the left or the right, or just as a 10. But he seems to be able to play the striker role as well. I have to take a lot of things I said about Conor Gallagher back, because I know last season I was heavily critical of him and said, I dubbed him the bull in the china shop. But like you just said, 13 kilometers in one game. I think he ran 12 against City as well. Something again ridiculous in back-to-back games in the space of a week. Conor Gallagher's been our best player this season. Even going back to last season, we have to credit him for it. And part of me thinks, is he playing for a move away because he knows that there's an intention for the board, maybe not so the manager, but the board want to try and sell him in the summer for FFP reasons? Is he playing for a move away? Does he want to move to a bigger club? Me personally, I hope that isn't the case. But do you think that is something in the back of his mind? He's thinking, if I do go, if they do have no option to sell me in the summer, I have to put myself in the best position to go to another top club.
I'm always a bit skeptical now with these answers, because I would have said the same about Mount last season. He was a boyhood Chelsea fan. He came from the academy. He had a year left on his contract, and probably I was kind of thinking to myself, he's definitely going to sign a new contract. And now we've got Gallagher in a similar situation, whereas the club is more hinting towards selling him, given that he's a sellable asset and we need to raise money for FFP reasons. That being said, I feel like the energy, the leadership, the discipline I've seen from Gallagher this season makes me think that he's here to stay and he wants to stay, and that's his number one priority. Of course, as a footballer, nothing's guaranteed or nothing's certain, so there's still a chance that he's told maybe come March, April, yeah, we're going to sell you come the summer. But right now he's just got to focus on his football. He's got a contract at Chelsea Football Club. His priority should be playing for the club, contributing with assists, goals, and performances like we saw against Palace, Villa, and even City on Saturday, to help the club achieve their goals this season. And I think I've seen that from him this season. So personally, I think there's a lot of other players I would look into selling before Gallagher. I think he should be bottom of that list in terms of the kind of homegrown academy players. There's players like Maatsen, Chalobah, Broja. Then you've got others like Ziyech, Lukaku, and Kepa out on loan that I think we should consider selling ahead of Gallagher. But obviously, we know that we've spoken about it a lot of times, that Bowley kind of considers the club as a business before anything. So whether a player's playing well or not, he might want to sell him. But it would just be such a blow for us Chelsea fans.
Yeah, I mean, I remember saying, I think if I go back to maybe, pre our 100th episode, I think I said I'd want him gone. But, you look at him now, like you said, he's matured as a player. He's definitely become one of the leaders in the team. Something that we've been lacking. We spoke about leadership, and it shouldn't really fall on his shoulders, but he seems to have been able to pick that baton up and just run with it, and he's done really well. Just looking now as well, I remember he was almost a banker to pick up a yellow card in most games, and he hasn't. He's been really, like you said, very disciplined in terms of his performances and not picking up. I think he hasn't picked one up since the 27th of December, which I know isn't a long time, but ironically against Crystal Palace last year. So, he's changed his game, and you can see that he's one of those players that even when we lose possession of the ball, he's at the other end, he's at our end of the pitch trying to recover the ball, whether it's him that's lost it or someone else. He does his defensive duties, but he's also good in attack now. And I think, he's adding goals to his game, which is something that, any player, if they can do that, is an asset to the team. So for me personally, he should be staying. It would worry me that we sell to another club, especially in England as well. If we sold him, what damage he could do, in an Arsenal or a Liverpool or another, even a Tottenham. Tottenham have been heavily linked with him. So even a team like that, what he could do in that team with certain players around him, it'd be dangerous, I think.
But also Gallagher himself, because I remember last summer or even January last year, he was linked to the likes of Everton, I think West Ham.
Yeah.
But given what he's proven this season, why would he want to go to an Everton who are fighting relegation? Surely his level now is a team fighting for top four. So like you said, a Tottenham, a Newcastle, those are direct rivals to us. So it is kind of worrying. And he's matured completely, like you said. I remember beginning of last season, was it the third or fourth game of the season against Leicester at home at Stamford Bridge, and he got 2 yellows in the first half, and he picked them up really quickly, and he just looked really rash. And at the time, he warranted those labels of bull in a china shop. Yeah. Whereas now, I'm sure he got those 2 yellows against Brighton early December. But I think he's a different type of player. He's a lot more mature, a lot more disciplined, and one of those senior leader figures in the dressing room, probably, which is crazy to say, given his age and how long he's been at the club in terms in the mix with the senior team. But yeah, definitely a player we need to do our best to keep our hands on.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. I agree. Let's move over to Saturday's game against Manchester City. I've got a question for you to start off with. The start of the game, or say last Friday, if someone had said to you a 1-1 result that Etihad against Manchester City, would you take it, or would you have said, I want 3 points?
I won't lie, I would have taken it 100%.
Yeah,
I think I messaged you my prediction, but on Saturday morning, and I said 3-1 City.
yeah.
And I think you said something similar, in fact.
I did.
So
I did change it though.
100%.
I did change it.
You did, yeah. I think you said, I remember this. You said 4-0 City, and then you changed it right before kickoff, saying, I'm actually quietly confident,
Yeah.
I think. And you're right to be, because it was a very good Chelsea performance. And I'm happy with a draw, to think we've gotten 2 points against City this season, and we haven't lost against them, whereas other teams have really struggled going into the Etihad. I think it was a really positive performance, especially in that first half, when you think right before the Sterling goal, the chances, the clear-cut chances, which we really lacked this season for Sterling and Jackson. And then the two redeemed themselves and combined for that first goal, the opener for Raheem Sterling, which was a really good finish. The way he kind of takes that touch to almost fool Kyle Walker, get past him, and then slot it past Ederson, curling it in. It was a really good finish. And even in the second half, sure, Haaland struggled on the day. I think we're kind of lucky that he struggled. He missed some big chances. Leo Colwell was absolutely fantastic up until that moment where he let Haaland have that header, which luckily he put it over the crossbar. But no, definitely I'm really happy with a point. Just really annoyed as well that it kind of helps Liverpool and Arsenal. That's the one part that kind of pisses me off.
Yeah, definitely. It's yeah, I mean, I was happy with the performance. I mean, we can't lie. It's never an easy ground to go to, the Etihad, or to play Manchester City. It's always difficult because you just know what you're up against. But I think one of the things, and they sort of picked this up, I think, within like post match and some of the analysis that I watched afterwards, was around, you have to take the game to City. You have to attack them. If you don't attack them, or you sit back and you invite pressure, it's gonna be a cricket score. It could be 5, 6, 7-0 if you're not careful. So I think we had to attack them, and we did. We done that. I thought throughout the game, I thought Nicholas Jackson was good again, sort of playing through the centre and sometimes playing on the left, and he worked well. He should have scored his chance though. I mean, that first half chance, he should have taken that. Maybe you lift it over Edison, or you take it round him, but again, I'm not going to heavily criticize him, because I think he played well, and the link up, like you said, with Sterling was brilliant. I want to give a credit out, or shout out to Malagusto, because I think he done very, very well to keep Jeremy Doku quiet throughout that game. Not just him, but if you notice as well, Caicedo was doing a lot of defensive duties, occupying space that Alvarez was trying to run into whenever, and it limited what Nathan Ake could do with Doku down that left side as well, because whenever the ball was passed to Doku, Gusto had one job and one job only, and that was to nullify any opportunity for Doku to even get a ball into the box. And that's where Caicedo was very vital in that role of filling that space that Alvarez was trying to run into. So it worked really well. And like you said, Haaland as well. I mean, he could have had 4 goals, let's be honest. He could have had 4 clean-cut chances, but I was impressed. I want to ask you about the substitutions in the second half, because he kind of had a mixed emotion, I think, throughout social media over the weekend. But do you feel that we went, and I think I said this, but do you think we went too defensively in terms of parking the bus, so to speak, too early in that game? Because it kind of then, like as I said, if you don't attack City and you try and defend, you just invite so much pressure, and it is a lapse in concentration, I think, from Colwell for the goal from Rodri, but. Say it's lapse in concentration from Colwell, but it was a goal that could have been avoided, I think, is what I'm saying. Did we do that too early in the game, do you reckon?
Possibly. I mean, when you're winning 1-0 and you're defending really well, you don't want to change things or mix things up too much. I think the substitutions did make sense, possibly. I think a fair few players picked up yellows. Caicedo being one of them. I think it was Sterling another, and there might have been another player. So I think we brought on, was it Nkuku, Chalobah, and Cassidy?
Yeah.
And I felt like it was a minute or two after we brought on Cassidy, they'd scored. So maybe we're kind of struggling a bit with formation or understanding kind of how to play. Big risk as well bringing Chalobah. I think that's his first a couple of minutes of competitive football since end of last season. Very surprising even to still see him in the Chelsea shirt, if I'm honest. Unlucky with the deflection for the goal that took it in, but I think he did really well with another one at one point where I think he blocks it and he puts it out for a corner. But yeah, maybe substitutions kind of meant we were trying to park the bus a bit too early. And as well, I don't think we have the quality and depth in the squad to park the bus, if I'm completely honest. We don't have, back in the day, we'd bring on a David Luiz, a John Terry, even when he was kind of at back end of 2012. That Gary Cahill, these type of players that experience and know how to kind of create that spine and see the game out. But I don't think we have that quality anymore. So we need to kind of maybe learn to deal with the pressure with the players we've got on the pitch. But as well, 1-0 at City, you probably expect us to try to be content with that and try to defend that lead. But if I'm completely honest, it felt like the goal was going to happen, whether it be in the start of the game, 60th minute, 90th minute, it was coming. So yeah, not much we could have done, I feel.
Yeah, it was tough because I think when you look back on it, I think, even if I haven't watched it yet, I'll probably do it today later on. But if you watch the game back, we should have easily won that game. Easily. I think you look back to the Nicholas Jackson chance. I think Sterling had a really good chance, I think, in the second half as well. Good save from Edison, to be fair. But, we had our chances and obviously we got the goal. So there's 3 chances, but you say that and Haaland has 4 chances. City were just breaking us down bit by bit throughout that second half. But I think you're right about the options that I think Pochettino had from the bench as well. You look at our bench, Chalobah, who hasn't featured, it kind of tells you it was a last ditch desperation substitution a little bit from Pochettino because ideally you'd probably want Silva to come on in that situation or Badiashile to come in and just see the game out. I remember back in the day, like John Obi Mikel used to sometimes come on and just slot into that role and he'd do it really well and then you'd see the game out with him. We don't have that. We brought on, I think when City, the problem was when City scored, we didn't have anything going forward. Really, we just had, I think, Nkunku, I think at the time. Palmer had come off by then, I think, or just after, I think he'd come off. I'm trying to think who else came off then as well. Nicholas Jackson came off as the third sub, didn't he? So going forward, the latter start parts of that game, we didn't have anyone to kind of score for us. We didn't have anything going forward. And going to that 5 at the back, I think kind of maybe threw the team off a little bit, but it's City, and I think City were always, like you said, always going to attempt to score, and they were going to get a goal at some point, whether it was in the first minute or the last kick of the game. That goal was going to come, but it's annoying because it doesn't move us anywhere in the league, which a win would have. I think would have took us maybe 8th, I think, in the league, but it just feels a bit disheartening. I think maybe my own personal perspective, but it feels disheartening that we're still 10th. We put in a really good performance against Palace in the second half. We put in a really good 90 minutes plus against City, and we haven't budged in the league. Do you still have any optimism? I was going to say expectation, but optimism about us trying to get into that sort of, I don't want to call it a top 8, top 7, but into those kind of Conference League spots in the league this season?
Yeah, and we kind of spoke about it. Also, the League Cup final is a gateway to the Conference League, I think. But if I'm completely honest, I've stopped looking at the table. I take one game at a time. I try to just focus on the performances and what I kind of see during the 90 minutes and then slowly try to see, okay, if we won 2 or 3 games, then hopefully there's a bit of momentum. But we haven't had that momentum. We saw, I think, back end of December when we beat Sheffield, Luton, Palace, and I think Fulham 4 in a row. But since then, we kind of struggled. In January, we lost to Wolves. I think we drew another game. But yeah, I think it's all about that momentum now. We've got a big game on Sunday. Debatable whether it's the most important game of the season. I think it is simply how young this squad is and how being in a final at Wembley will be very valuable to them. And also it may allow Pochettino to stay longer in the job should he get a result and a bit of silverware. So yeah, I think from a performance perspective, it's a big confidence boost. But from a kind of point tally, we're still 10th. We're still rooted to 10th. I think we've got the likes of, was it Wolves, Fulham, and other teams breathing down our necks. Yeah. So yeah, I think we should more focus on our games rather than the teams ahead of us in the table right now.
Yeah, I always go back to that Wolves game though. I think had we won that, we'd be talking about, well, obviously Brighton thrashed Sheffield United yesterday, but we would have been eighth, would have been eighth going into that game. So it's still things like that. I think, those kind of games where we possibly expect to win, we have to start doing better in those games. The Wolves games where we're getting hammered just isn't good enough. So I think we need to, for me, I agree with you, I don't see us pushing anywhere up the table, but a game by game, I want to see some improvement and progression. And you put out a tweet at the weekend, 3 games now unbeaten. So it's definitely something I think we need to be a bit more. We just need to keep going and stepping on it. As you said about the final, big game coming up, which we'll talk about. But before we move on, I want to talk about Axel Dezazi, who for me, man of the match performance. Celebrating corners, celebrating clearances, celebrating everything that was coming towards him. It felt like a leader at the back again. Someone who's able. I mean, I was very reserved about it when we got him. I was unsure whether he was going to fit into the team, whether he was good enough. But he feels like he's slowly convincing me anyway that he's putting in some really good performances and someone that we can possibly trust going forward with the imminent possible departure of Thiago Silva. But how do you rate Dezazi so far, especially over the last couple of games? Do you see there's a bit more consistency coming in from him, from his games?
Yeah, he's growing on me. He really is growing on me. And like you said, kind of a signing we made in the summer, I felt almost like a panic buy after Wesley Fofana got injured. We panicked and we needed another centre-back. It seems like we've got a good build or rapport with Monaco after signing Badiashile. And I think Zakaria went on loan there probably. So yeah, I felt like I didn't know much about the player, and he scored in his debut against Liverpool. But from a defensive perspective, after that, it was a bit shaky at times. I think some of his poor positionings has led to goals throughout the season. We've got to remember as well, he's 25. And I feel like a lot of the players we signed, the Badiashils, the Mudriks, the Andre Santoses, the Cassades, we're talking about 19, 20-year-olds that aren't ready. But at 25, you are ready. Let's be honest. In today's football world, some of the 25-year-olds we talk about, the João Felixes, the Mbappes, the even Bellingham, who's only 21, but we're talking about players that are world-class. So I think at 25, you've got no excuse. You are ready. So I think he's slowly starting to show signs of being a more kind of senior figure, being more of a leader. We saw his celebrations against Palace when he kind of almost WWE style throws himself into the crowd to celebrate the Gallagher winner. And then against City, that was his best performance in a Chelsea shirt. Yeah. Like you said, he was celebrating corners, he was celebrating blocks, he was celebrating everything. And definitely a worthy man of the match performance. But I keep using this word throughout all our recordings, but it's about the consistency now. It's all good to do that one game, but you've got to do it throughout the season on a consistent level. And that's why I don't think players like Badiashile have the potential, because he's made a series of mistakes now. He's in and out of the team. But if Disasi just puts in another performance like he did against City at the Etihad on Saturday, in the League Cup final against Liverpool, and then in the other big games we've got coming up, I think it's Brentford, Tottenham, and these games, then that's when you start to think, all right, this player can make it. He's got what it takes. He's got the ability. He's got the passion. He's got the quality in him. But yeah, very reassuring and promising performance, but we just need to see more of it now.
Yeah, definitely. And we need someone who's going to be able to lead that line at the back. We don't know who that's going to be, whether that's going to be a new centre-back that comes in with a bit more experience, or one of the players that we've got at the moment. You talk about, Thiago Silva, who might leave, potentially will leave at the end of the summer. Someone has to come in and be the vocal, controlling centre-back that we've got. Trevor Chalobah could be on his way out as well. So we need someone that's going to be able to step up and do it consistently. I don't want to jump the gun, but I do feel like it could be him. The signs that I'm seeing from him out of all the defenders that we've signed currently, taking away Malang Sarr, who I think is still at the club. But, the Badiashile, Wesley Fofana, and Dezazi, I look at him and I see a bit more about him. And I do think he's a good age. I think, 25, 26, he has to be at the age where he can take, control of this team and do really well.
26. I think he's turning 26 in a few weeks, actually.
So he's got to do well. He really has. It's got to be a top performance from them, and if he from him consistently before we can really assess him. But he's doing well so far. We've got to hope he keeps that up. But I want to move over to, before we move over to the best part of the podcast, talking about the League Cup final, our early thoughts about that. I want to talk about Lewis Hall, who is still obviously loaned out with, I think, with the obligation for Newcastle to buy him at the end of this loan deal that ends in the summer. I think Newcastle finished the game at the weekend 2-2, I think, or was it 2-2 or 2-1? Did they lose? I can't remember.
I think it was 2-2 at Bournemouth, if
Was it
I'm not
2-2?
mistaken.
I
Yeah.
think you might be right. Hasn't got much game time. Hasn't been playing at all really for Newcastle. If there's an option, which we've heard, obviously the stories that broke just before Christmas around, the loan deal was based on where Newcastle finished based on their performances in terms of, can they get back into the Champions League, and I think it's not based on how many appearances he actually makes for the club. But if there is an option for us to return, or for Newcastle to return Lewis Hall to us, is that something you would take, or is it something that we just need to put to bed now? He's going to be a Newcastle player in the summer. It's not our problem that he's not playing.
I think maybe given how the loan planned out last summer and how I think there's a buy option in there, and he kind of came out and said he was a boyhood Newcastle fan. Financially, I think we plan to sell him next summer, and I think that won't change. I'd be very surprised if he features again for Chelsea, because we've got players like Chilwell now. I think we spent too much money on Cucurella to consider selling him. And I think we've got Maatsen. It's still whether to be seen if Dortmund buy him permanently. But then I think we should also learn from our mistakes. And even when we've had 3 fit centre backs at the start of centre backs, left backs at the start of the summer, at times we found ourselves with none of them being fit, or 2 of them injured and 1 out of favour. So I think Pochettino might want to reassess him in the summer should he come back for pre-season. But also we talk a lot about sellable assets, and he's a big sellable asset. Whether it's not Newcastle, there might be another team that's interested, whether that be Everton, one of the promoted teams like a Southampton or a Leeds. So yeah, I think we've got to think about that. But there is a lot of quality there. We saw it last season when let's be honest, we were shit on the pitch. And he was one of the silver linings of our performances. I think big performance at the Etihad, at Old Trafford, which are tough stadiums to go to. So yeah, I'm still expecting us to sell him, but I'd like to see him play a part again for Chelsea.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I didn't get to see many games that he played for us, but when he did, he put in a good performance, and I think he was one of those players that loved to get forward. I think back to those cup games against City, and he had really good chances in those games when he got to play in them. He's someone that, for me, I just can't understand why Newcastle. I think they are struggling defensively, I think, at the moment with a couple of injuries as well. I know Tino Livramento, who is technically a right back, has been playing left back for them as well, as much as he can play there. But it just seems now that he's fell down the pecking order at Newcastle. Since his story broke as well last year, it's almost like Eddie Howe's taking him out of the team, exiled him from the squad, and it just doesn't seem, for me, it just seems a bit strange that that's all happening. I'd love to see him back at Chelsea, but I do agree with you. I think the fact that he would be, I think, deemed as pure profit as well if we can sell him as an asset, which the club will see him as. I think his last Chelsea days are done, and like you say, he's a Newcastle fan, so I think he'd probably want that move to actually go through anyway. They could then maybe loan him out to somewhere else to get him some more development time elsewhere. But I think for us, it'd be a shame. It'd be a shame for him to sort of dwindle down and not. He's got a lot of quality. So just maybe from a Chelsea perspective, I think he'd be really good at another club if it's not Newcastle. I think he's got a lot of potential.
Definitely. I think I just read before recording this episode that they've recorded Joe White, who I think is another left back from his loan at Crewe Alexandra, and he's ahead of him in the pecking order. I think he made an appearance against whoever they played, Bournemouth, the other day, ahead of Lewis Hall. And it could be, I know that Newcastle are struggling as well with FFP restrictions. They're kind of considering selling Guimaraes, Joelinton, Almiron, these type of players. And the last thing they want is to spend 35 million on a left back potentially. So they might want to assess the options and their homegrown talent ahead of another team's player who's on loan, and could see the move made permanent in the summer.
Yeah, and they seem to be doing it the correct way. Not that we aren't, but I mean, in terms of trying to restrict, to meet the restrictions of FFP, they seem to be doing it the right way at Newcastle. So that could be another good point. 35 million for a 19-year-old, which I think Lewis Hall is at the moment. It's a lot of money. I don't think anyone would buy him to fit into a first team anyway. I don't think he'd be playing regular football week in, week out. But I think he should be playing a lot more than he is at the moment. But one to be seen, one to keep an eye on. I think Chelsea fans, let us know. Would you like to see Lewis Hall back at Chelsea after his Newcastle loan? Let us know your thoughts in the comments about that one. Should be an interesting topic of discussion. Let's talk about next Sunday, or this Sunday. It's Monday. Keep forgetting. Let's talk about the cup final, Wembley, this Sunday. I think they've moved the time, haven't they, slightly forward for an earlier kickoff time now. But I'm going to say, actually, this is a big game. This is, you said it, I think you asked me 2 weeks ago, is this the biggest game of our season? I think I said possibly because of the stepping stones, and it should be something we should be able to build on. This is our biggest game of the season. It has to go down as that. What's your thoughts going into it? Early thoughts, because obviously there'll be a week of, I think Liverpool have got to play again. I think they've got Luton this week as well. They've already picked up a lot of injuries from what we're hearing. They lost Jota, which looked like a really bad injury at the weekend. Slobberslai's out. Curtis Jones came off injured. Trent's out, I think, for that as well. Alisson's a question mark. Salah's just come back. So they've got their own injury crisis going on at Liverpool like we have. But what's your early thoughts going into this? The fact we don't play for another week now, is that more pressure on Liverpool to try and get some of these players back?
It's funny how a lot of people talk about Liverpool now having an injury crisis, but we've had one all season and no one's said a word about that. It's typical. But no, I definitely feel slightly more optimistic going into this fixture and this game and this final compared to how I felt maybe a couple of weeks ago, especially after that Wolves defeat. Unbeaten in the last three tough away games at Palace, Villa, and City. And like you mentioned, all those players that Liverpool have injured, crucial players, arguably first starters. Sure, they have the depth in their team to replace them. The likes of Conor Bradley, who I think is a fantastic player. Yeah. The likes of McAllister, even their substitute goalkeeper Kelleher, very good goalkeeper as well. So they've got the depth and the quality. I always say if we want to win these trophies, we've got to be at our best and beat the best. I think it's going to be a big test. I think in the review of the Liverpool game, he asked me, what do we have to do to beat Liverpool in the final after losing 4-1 to them? We've got to just learn from our mistakes in that game. We've got to play our football. And also, I think, like you mentioned, now we're slowly starting to find that spine of the team, the best 11 we can field. So I wouldn't tinker too much of the squad. I think it's kind of working very well. We're very fortunate to have a midweek fixture, and we can focus on the final from now. Hopefully we won't pick up any more injuries. Hopefully the players like Thiago Silva will be fit. If he plays a part, it's still to be seen. Players like Robert Sanchez, even, if he goes to penalty shootout, you might want to have both goalkeepers ready. So yeah, it's going to be a tough game. I'm slightly more optimistic. But I'm still expecting another one of those kind of Liverpool games where I leave Wembley, I head back to Wembley tube station in a really pissed off mood, probably lost the penalties, all the cameras on Klopp. So yeah, I'm already expecting that. So I'm almost that mentality, hoping for the best, expecting the worst. But yeah, definitely more optimistic though.
Yeah, I mean, you haven't had the best records of your Wembley final visits, have you, over the last couple of years? But to say all that, to say this, I think, with finals, it's anyone's, and I think when who wants it more on a day? We've played Liverpool, I think 2 years ago, was it? Or just over 2 years ago, where we lost two finals, League Cup, FA Cup final, to them both on penalties as well. We have to remember as well, we scored that goal that was disallowed, that should not have been disallowed as well, from the man who shall not be named. And I'm like you, I think after that City performance, and I know you can't really just base it on two games, but after those two performances, especially the Palace second half, the City game on Saturday, I do go into this game with a bit more expectation. I think the pressure rightfully is on Liverpool because they are expected to beat us. That's just what people, if you ask anyone, even not even in Liverpool, just a non-Chelsea fan, a non-Liverpool fan, they probably put their money on Liverpool just because of how they are. Like you said, they've got a bit more of a squad depth as well. But I think we're slowly building a bit of momentum and a bit of consistency at the right time in this squad. I know we had that massive blip against Wolves, but I'm confident, and I think if we can, a question I've got to ask you in a minute actually, but I'm confident we can win that game, providing, as you said, we don't tweak the squad too much. But the
Mhm.
question I have for you, I mean, I look back to that City performance and I look at our defense, and I was really happy with it. Obviously, the missing person was Thiago Silva in that defense on Saturday. You mentioned it before. Is this a game where you would probably bring him back in, or do you leave Thiago Silva as an option to see the game out if we're 1-0 up, 2-0 up? Is that really the time, in my opinion, that it would be to bring on Thiago Silva? Or do you start him from the start because you know you need a bit of experience in a big game, which you just said, and I've probably said as well, or we both think is our biggest game of the season so far?
I think most likely the latter. If
Yeah.
he's injured currently and he missed the game at the Etihad, it means he's not fit and he's still nursing an injury. So it'll be a race against the clock to see if he's fit enough to even make the matchday squad on Saturday. But I wouldn't tinker with what works so well at the Etihad, and that's the centre back partnership of Colwell and Disassi. If we've got the option of Silva on the bench, I think that would be a blessing to have him come on and see the game out if we're 1-0 up, or if you want to take it to extra time. But yeah, I don't think maybe starting from the start. And something I'm starting to see is a bit more in recent performances when Silva has played, especially in that first half against Palace, is he does slow the game down slightly.
Yeah.
Even though he's a fantastic player, and I still think he's probably one of the best players we've signed in the last 5-6 years. Um, he's so experienced and he's so calm and composed on the ball that he does slow the game down slightly. And there's times when we want a bit of urgency, we want to create something. Instead of finding that forward pass, he'll pass it to the other centre back. But yeah, I still think he's got a part to play on Saturday, but I'd most likely be off the bench.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think even if he was fully fit, I'd probably start him as a sub. And I think we have to, and I've been saying this for nearly 2 years now, and I still can't believe I'm saying it, but I think we have to start thinking about life after Thiago Silva, phasing him out of the team. As much as he's still, got it, he's still a quality centre back. He's probably still a world class centre back. I think we have to start thinking about life afterwards without him being at the club, and I think we have to integrate a better or just as good as a partnership that we've had with Silver and whoever he's played alongside. We have to get something like that with whether it's Colwell, Disassi, Badiashile, Colwell, but whoever it is for Fafana when he comes back eventually. We've got to start thinking ahead of that for next season. And in hindsight, I know if we lose like 2-0 or 2-1 and Silver's been sat on the bench, I probably am going to say we should have risked him because he's on the bench. The motto
Mm.
already is if he's fit enough to be on the bench, he's fit enough to start the game. But I just think I can't remember if it was the FA Cup or the League Cup, but there was one game, the final, if you remember, and he injured himself. Do you remember? And he took like a tablet and he carried on. That was the FA Cup, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
I think it was one of those two, either the League Cup final or the FA Cup against Liverpool. I
Yeah,
remember that, and I
yeah,
think so he scored a penalty in one of the two.
yeah. I'm trying to think which one
The
it
league, the
was.
League Cup one. Yeah,
So he can. What I'm saying all that because he can. He's a warrior. He'll play through it. I think if he's injured, I don't think he'll want to miss this game. This is probably his last opportunity of real silverware at Chelsea. Last maybe walk out at Wembley. So it's a big thing for him on a personal level. I think he won't want to miss it. But I think for the sake of the team and what he's hopefully going to be able to do, should we be 1-0 or 2-1 up, whatever it is, his role on that day could literally just be to see the game out. And I think we might need him to do that. So
he'll be like a second manager on a touchline, like in Porto, won't
yeah,
he? Should he be on the bench?
yeah, definitely, definitely. Thinking forward, I mean, and Kunku hasn't really played as much as I would have liked him to have played over the last 2 or 3 games. I thought, he would have probably got a bit more game time, potentially even start against. I think I had him in my predicted lineup on Saturday, but do you stick with that? I mean, you said it kind of at the start of this, so I probably know the answer, but do you stick with what you know has worked for you against City, against Aston Villa, against Crystal Palace with that sort of front three of Jackson, maybe Sterling or Madueke, and then obviously Palmer, Gallagher? Do you stick with that, or do you go with someone who you want to try and get you the goals on Sunday? Do you reckon that's something we need to look at? I'm thinking now, Kelleher coming out, Jackson's on a 1v1 and he just literally, gives him the ball almost. Is that something that you think Nkunku would either dink it over the goalkeeper or use a bit of football wit and put it around him, around the goalkeeper? Do you change that?
Yeah, I'd stick with the same formation and lineup that played against City, but you did say, well, I'd much rather back Nkuku in a one-on-one with Kelleher than Jackson. But then in that situation, you're kind of hoping maybe a Cole Palmer or someone like that finds himself in that situation instead.
Yeah.
And the link-up play between Sterling, Palmer, and Jackson's look really well. And then hopefully now we've also got the midfielders contributing with goals. But a good option to have on the bench, and I would expect him to at least play 35 to 45 minutes to 40 minutes.
I'm still on the fence. I'm going to come back to you on Friday with that one. I just don't know. Part of me, like 70% of me, saying start him because we need a good start against Liverpool. That's a given. We can't go in at 0-0 half time, or it's getting to the 70th minutes and 0-0. We need goals in that first half, I think, to quieten down the fans, to rattle the players, to rattle Jurgen Klopp. We have to be able to hit the ground running in that game. And Jackson might surprise me and get a hat trick. You never know. But I'm sure we'll have a more in-depth interview review of the game closer to the game on Friday as well. We won't do predictions yet because I think obviously Liverpool have got their game. I think they play on Wednesday. I think they got Luton, which will be a tough game for them. You know, look how they played against United yesterday. It'll be a tough
The
game.
giant slayers, like I call them, Luton.
Yeah, no, they are. I think they'll give Liverpool a good game. But we can't even think about that. We just literally have to think about this week now, prepare, hopefully get some of these players back. You know, Carney Chukwuemeka, I think, picked up a slight injury as well. Someone that maybe might be on the bench on Sunday as well. So we have to see what comes of the week ahead. But it's a big week. We have to call it like it is. It's a big week and it is a big game.
Definitely, yeah. I've got my tickets. They arrived in the post on Friday. So looking forward to it. Definitely will be some match day content on the socials from that game. But yeah, like you said, I'm sure we'll talk about it in a bit more detail on Friday when we get more of an idea of who's fit, not fit, and also after Liverpool's game against Luton.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. And I'm pretty sure there's still tickets available. I'm almost certain this morning. I'm pretty sure, maybe I read the tweet wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's still tickets available. So if anyone's after one, I think now would be your best time to try and get one.
Yeah, it should be a good game. Like I always say, like a day out at Wembley is always an experience. So if you're still reluctant to kind of see Chelsea play Liverpool in the final because you're unsure about the result, match day experience at Wembley just can't be topped.
I was going to say they could be sat next to you as well, so it could be even more of a blessing as well. But
you'll hear my very foul mouth if you're sat next to me.
Nothing wrong with that at all. But yeah, no, looking forward to it. Obviously, it's a busy week for many clubs. Unfortunately, fortunately for us, it's not. We've got a good week to prepare now for the final. No distractions as well. No games to think about midweek. So, good for us. But let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, share it with your friends, all the rest of it as well. So we appreciate anyone that's already doing that. Theo, as always, thank you very much. Pleasure as always. Don't forget the tree link is there in the description, and also the Bridge Film social account, as we discussed at the start of the podcast, that will be in the description as well. So give them a follow and keep an eye out for the full featured documentary, hopefully very soon. We'll be back on Friday, another podcast episode. Thank you very much for watching. Until then, enjoy the rest of your week, and let's hope we win against Liverpool in the Carabao Cup final.